Hello and welcome back to Gapeys Garden. It's time to get our tomatoes in the ground, and this is extremely late for getting this done. Normally I like to do it in mid-May, but this year has been extremely cold and wet that it just hasn't been ideal to do it until now. So today is June 1st and definitely the latest I've ever planted tomatoes. But it's been a few years since I've done a transplanting tomato video, so I thought I would go ahead and do that this year. I'm going to show you what I am putting in the transplanting holes this season. It's changed a little bit from prior years, but nothing too drastically different. The tomatoes are probably getting pretty root bound. They are still in 3.5-inch containers, and I started these in mid-March, so they are definitely ready to go in the ground. Let me just show you the space that we're going to be planting these in. I've got 8 kind of larger sized tomatoes and some plum tomatoes that I'll be planting in this bed here. And you can see I've still got some overwintered and early spring greens here. We've got some spinaches. What else? We've got some radicchio there, another radicchio back there. And I have already put the tomato cages here so that I know exactly where to plant them and where to plant my companion plants. So these are called Texas tomato cages. They are not cheap, but they are definitely worth the price. They're very sturdy. They actually fold up, so they're easy to store, and they just last a really long time. And they also stack. So this is just the first level of the tomato cage. So they do have supports where you can add on multiple stories of these, but I usually only add one more, and that's usually enough to handle the tomatoes. Now, I just put these in, I think yesterday or the day before, and the main reason is because I wanted to get my companion plants planted. So this year, and actually last year was the first year I tried this, I'm putting some kale in here intermixed with the tomatoes. And previous years I've planted kale kind of all in one spot, and they always got inundated with aphids. But I found last year doing it this way, they're kind of more spread out, so the aphids have a harder time attacking them. So I've got one kale here, I've got one kale on the other side there, and I've got this one here. This is the dazzling blue kale, a really pretty kind of lacinato type variety. And then I've got one more Russian kale back there. So I've got a total of 4 kale plants kind of between the tomatoes, and I've also got some flowers. So I've got the Fairy's Best Marigold. So I got these seeds from Fairy Morse Seeds. So this is kind of your typical marigold. And then we've also got some zinnias. So this one here is the Bernery's Giant Orange Zinnia. So I did top that one. It was trying to flower and I didn't want it to go to flower just yet. So I chopped the top off there, and it's starting to get some more side shoots, so it'll produce a lot more flowers in the long run. And I've also got some radishes here that are left over that I planted a couple months ago. And then I've also got a Cosmo. This is the Apricot Lemonade Cosmo. And I think that's all the, oh, I do have one more zinnia back here. This one is the Queen Lime Blush, one of my favorites. All right, let's get to planting some tomatoes. Now, wouldn't you know it, it just started sprinkling. Hopefully we can get these planted before it starts raining too much. So I'm digging a hole a little bit longer than the size of the tomato because we want to bury the stem a little bit more in the hole. These tomatoes did get a little bit leggy from being crowded in this container for so long. So we're going to start with the San Marzano Retorita. And first I'm going to put our stuff in the hole. So the first thing I'm going to add, and it doesn't have to be in this order, but this is the trifecta fertilizer. And this is the fertilizer I've been using for the last several years. The granules are very large, so that makes it a more slow release fertilizer. So there is a mix of slow and fast nutrients or fertilizer in here. So I'm just going to grab a couple small handfuls, put that in there, and then I'm also going to be adding some crushed eggshells. So these are eggshells from our chickens And we first bake them at about 350 degrees for about 10 minutes. And then I put them through our Vitamix. We have a grain attachment, and that makes it a really fine, not quite a complete powder, but very fine granules. And so I'm going to just add about the same amount of that, a couple tablespoons. And then I'm also going to be adding this mycorrhizae. This one is from Plant Success Organics, and I tried this for the first time last year, and I think it worked pretty well, so I'm going to be adding that again this year, and I am almost out of this actually, so I don't have a whole lot left. So I'm just going to sprinkle a little bit in the hole there. And then the last ingredient I'm going to be adding, which is new for me this year, is some earthworm castings. So we got this big bag from Costco this year, so I'm just going to add a small handful of that to the hole as well. And then the last step is just to mix that in just a little bit here. All right, now all we have to do is get our tomato plant. So the Marzano, the leaves on these are usually a little bit longer and kind of droopy. So we don't want any leaves touching the ground. So I'm actually going to be removing the last few leaves from the stem. And usually they will just break off if you just push it up. It snaps right off. And we're just going to lift it right out. And the roots are a little bit root bound. They aren't too bad. And what I like to do is just break those up a little bit. And I just look for a stick that's nearby and just kind of use that to loosen up the roots a little bit. This one actually isn't too bad at all. And that should be good. And we're just going to put it in the hole. And now we're going to monitor the leaves. You can see this one here is touching the ground a little bit. So I'm going to go ahead and remove that one as well. So we don't have a whole lot of leaves left on that plant, but we don't want that touching the ground because that could cause some fungal issues with the plant. So that looks really good. That should be perfect. So we're just going to press that down a little bit. And I will be coming back later and putting a mulch around all of the tomatoes. Previously, about 3 years ago and before that, we were using a black weed cloth for our tomatoes. But last year I decided to try some straw, and that worked really well. So I think I'm going to do that again this year. We still need to get a bay of straw from the local farm store, and we're going to be giving that to the chickens so that they can eat all the seeds out of it before we put it around our plants, or we'll see a lot of seeds growing from the straw. We want to make sure you use straw and not hay, because hay will break down much quicker. So this is the San Marzano. We've got our label in there, and it's perfect. So now we're gonna go ahead and do the rest. It has started sprinkling a little bit more, so I'm not sure if it's gonna start raining more heavily, but we did get our larger sized tomatoes planted. I still have the cherry tomatoes to do. I've got 8 of those to get in the ground, and I'm hoping it holds off a little bit longer before it starts pouring rain. But I did want to go over some of the ingredients that I put in the hole before I go. So this trifecta fertilizer is from MI Gardener. It's a 5-10-4 fertilizer, so it is pretty high in the phosphate, so it's not really a all-purpose fertilizer, so it is pretty heavy on that. But I have had really good luck using this on both peppers and tomatoes, so I've been using this for several years and highly recommend it. And then the other thing I have here is the mycorrhizae, and I did finish off this container. And this is a 312 nutrients, and it is organic, as are all the ingredients here that I'm using, and by Plant Success Organics, and this is supposed to help with root development. And one thing to note, this does not work on brassicas, so if you want to use this on brassicas, don't bother, because it's not going to help it at all. I'm not sure the science behind that, but that's something I heard about last year, which was kind of surprising. There may be other things that this doesn't work on, but definitely not brassicas. And then the other thing is the eggshells. So this is added to help with blossom end rot. So if you get blossom end rot on your tomatoes, which usually happens more on the larger sized tomatoes and Marzano type tomatoes, this will help reduce that. So the last thing that I am adding this year is the earthworm castings, and this is just a natural source of plant nutrients. It's a vermicompost. We used to have our own worm bin, but I haven't had that running for a couple years. I have been wanting to do that, but we did get this big bag at Costco for a pretty decent price. So I decided to go ahead and use this on the tomatoes and peppers this year. And this is just supposed to help with root growth, and it also improves soil structure, it says. So hopefully the garden will do well this year. Hopefully it starts warming up pretty soon. But I'm gonna go ahead and hurry up and try and get those cherry tomatoes in the ground. And I will be doing a tomato update here once we start getting some tomatoes. So thanks for watching, and we'll talk to you again soon. If you enjoyed this video, please like and subscribe. You can also find me on Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook.